Sweeties, how are you doing? Welcome to Naya Sim, and thank you all so much for all the love and support. Hope you all are doing great. So today we'll be talking something very important, and it's about Claudette Gay, the Harvard University first Black woman who like was sworn in how many month ago. And you all remember that as of last month, she talked about something, and the Jewish community were mad because they said she is anti Semitic. She was asked a question and she gave her honest response, and they called her anti Semitic. So since then, they never let her rest. And now, the thing is that she resigned because they won't let her be. And why did she resign? See, there are some forces we don't even see, and there are some we'll see. I know this woman has been fighting to, and she's been fighting behind our back without us knowing what she has been going through. And they called it, I don't even know what they called it. And now the black women are the enemy because, every black woman, they will never let a black woman prosper. And the fact that Rufus said what he was going to do and he did it is something that I am still shocked about everything going on. And I don't know how this is really crazy, sincerely speaking. But then you know what? Let's get into this video.
You want to know something that really infuriates me? 2 weeks ago, I got on Threads and posted about Dr. Claudette Gay, something that I figured was really obvious. Basically that legitimate concerns about anti-Semitism had been co-opted by white nationalists who don't care at all about Jewish people, but definitely care about their long-term agenda to dismantle DEI across the country. And if they can take down the first black woman president of one of our most elite institutions, then they'd be successful. Because if they could do it at Harvard, they could do it anywhere. I don't know. I thought that was really clear. But instead, I got told I hated all Jews. I got told Dr. Claudette Gay hated all Jewish people. And, people just generally parroted right-wing extremist talking points at me like I was crazy. Meanwhile, a white nationalist who is known by other white nationalists for being a highly successful white nationalist broadcasted his white nationalist plan in real time, then celebrated his white nationalist victory with a racist trope to boot, and then asked y'all for money so he could continue on with his white nationalist victories. But I'm crazy? Dr. Claudette Gay, she became enemy number one, not Chris Rufo. Black women, we're the drama? You know what? Throw all of your Listen to Black Women merch away. Because you don't mean it. Unless we are saving you in an election or fighting for affirmative action, which statistically benefited white women the most, or, giving you movement blueprints for your own freedom struggles, you don't actually care what we have to say. Unless we are generally servicing you in some way, shape, or form, you don't want to hear it. So let's stop pretending. Black women have been black women all our lives. Do you really think that none of us know what it means to be the first and or the only in an elite institution? You really think we didn't know exactly what we saw when we were seeing it? Meanwhile, we told you all exactly what was happening, and you told us to shut our mouths, we were out of our depth, and we didn't know what we were talking about. And then the white nationalists came along and actually backed us up by giving you all the plan that we told you was afoot all along, and you still didn't believe it. I don't know why we repeat ourselves at this point. I'm not doing it anymore. So yeah, just throw the crew necks and the tote bags and the bumper stickers away. Don't hashtag Listen to Black Woman at me anymore. Because the one thing that comes close to making me as incensed as I am that Dr. Claudette Gay was forced to resign in the first place is the fakery. Stop lying to us.
So I want to talk for a second about the forced resignation of Claudette Gay as the president of Harvard. because I'm already seeing that the media and individuals are trying to spin it as something other than anti-blackness, something other than McCarthyism, something other than white supremacy. But the reality of it is, it really is all those things, right? So for those of you who are not familiar with Claudette Gay or the situation, what it boils down to is basically this. Many people have said that demonstrations in behalf of the people of Gaza, in behalf of Palestinians, on behalf of people facing atrocities at the hands of Israel, that all these demonstrations boil down to anti-Semitism. I'm sure you've seen this conversation, generally speaking, not just as it relates to higher education. This is obviously not true. And because it's not true, people like Claudette Gay, who lead these institutions, have said, look, if we have found situations where people are being anti-Semitic and it manifests in something that could lead to violence, we have stopped it. We have suspended students, expelled students, so on and so forth. But what we are seeing is that primarily these demonstrations are not violent, they are peaceful, and they are on behalf of people who are facing massive atrocities, right? And for saying that, and for having that stance, not just her, but others as well, very powerful people have called for her head, right? And because Harvard decided to keep her on, what they found was other ways to talk about how she was not up to par to be president of Harvard. Oh, she plagiarized, so on and so forth, which, you know, is not even really founded. Like, no one could prove that. But nonetheless, because of all the things happening in the media, how much she was being attacked, so on and so forth, she ultimately resigned. Now, the thing that's being left out of the equation was, not only was she a black president of Harvard, not only was she a black woman president of Harvard, she was the first ever black president generally of Harvard, right? This major feat, this historic thing, one of the premier institutions in the world finally had a black president, and you ousted her, forced her to leave in less than 6 months. It might have been 7, but like the shortest tenure in Harvard history for a president. But somehow you have now been like, oh, well, it's because she wasn't defending marginalized students. What are you talking about? She is a marginalized person, and not only is she a marginalized person, but anti-blackness and other forms of discrimination and bigotry, so on and so forth, that relate to her and to other students has been a thing on that campus, and she was working to try to fucking nip it in the butt. And you haven't spoken up about that, right? Like, what Harvard president has been forced to resign because of anti-blackness, huh? Because of Islamophobia? Like, what's going on here? Like, if this is not McCarthyism, I legitimately don't know what is. And to the point of this tweet that Mark Lamont Hill put up, I mean, here's the thing, right? Like I do think that the next president should be a black woman, and in all likelihood it will be. But realistically, that black person, that black woman, whomever it is, will not have the same politics, right? So ultimately what you're saying is like, oh yeah, we should have another black woman president who's more aligned with Israel. Like, what are we doing here? The conversation isn't about having a black woman as president. The conversation is, how are we letting people, like, again, suffer McCarthyism, anti-blackness, and white supremacy? Like, how are we letting this happen? It's not about getting another black woman president. It's about, how do we let this happen to this one?
Okay, guys, we need to talk about Dr. Claudette Gay, the now former president of Harvard University. She was one of 3 university presidents, all women, mind you, who participated in a gotcha Republican hearing in the House last month that was designed not to illuminate anything about campus anti-Semitism, as Republicans claimed, but rather to put on display for the MAGA base the right's hatred of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, they really hate diversity, which, of course, is the product of the 20th century they hate so much. So everything they do is about removing diversity. The mere presence of anyone who isn't white or male from spaces they think are reserved for white men drives them nuts. And in the wake of that hearing, the right-wing anti-DEI brigade got part of what they wanted. Days later, University of Pennsylvania President Elizabeth Magill announced she was stepping down. But the two others, Claudine Gay and MIT President Sally Kornbluth, remained. So naturally, Claudine Gay, the only black woman on the target list, became the focal point of a legion of mediocre men whose mission is to eradicate diverse people from education, from kindergarten through PhD. These men accused Gay of plagiarism. But first, some facts are in order. Harvard University itself never accused Claudine Gay, who got her PhD there, of plagiarism. Nor did they conclude that any issues with her academic citations even amounted to misconduct. As the AP correctly notes, the outrage came not from her academic peers, but rather from her political foes, led by conservatives who put her career under intense scrutiny. And the accusations of plagiarism basically came from one right-wing anti-DEI activist in particular, who faithful readers will remember from this show as the architect of the right's war on critical race theory. Good old Christopher Rufo, a Harvard wannabe and fake intellectual who's perfected a grift of ratcheting up anger about things that make middleweight white dudes like himself, Tucker Carlson and their ilk, very, very angry. You know, things like not being president of Harvard or even getting into Harvard as a student, both of which Claudine Gay has done and Christopher Rufo has not. It is worth noting that he didn't just wage a war against Claudine Gay. He telegraphed every step of what he was really trying to destroy and how he was going to do it. A month before the sham congressional hearing, he tweeted about how to fix academia and said, quote, abolish DEI bureaucracies and punish universities that discriminate on the basis of race. He later claimed that Claudine Gay, quote, quietly built a diversity empire, overseeing a racist admissions program, a sprawling DEI bureaucracy, and an effort to dename buildings and reduce the visual presence of white men on campus. The next day, he straight up admitted that he launched the story of plagiarism accusations in order to topple her. And ultimately, his grifty crusade was successful. Claudine Gay resigned, saying it was in the best interest of Harvard not to focus on any individual. Meanwhile, Rufo is out there gloating about his transparent victory. He told Politico, I've run the same playbook on critical race theory, on gender ideology, on DEI bureaucracy. This is a universal strategy that can be applied by the right to most issues. And now everyone on the right is high-fiving each other over the successful execution of his plan, which, far from being brilliant or clever, merely requires the other side, and yes, that includes the media, to be hypersensitive, easy marks. And it is important to remember that Claudine Gay's resignation is not an individual story. The attack on her is a symbol of a greater war against the progress of the 20th century, which these men are determined to repeal. It's not just undoing Black educational and business progress and banning accurate Black history and the boogeyman critical race theory. They want to force women and people of color back into their place, too. Back to the kitchen and the birthing bed, presumably serving and obeying, just like the bad old days that were only good for people like Christopher. Case in point, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's victory in court Tuesday. The far-right Fifth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals has ruled that Texas can ban life-saving emergency abortions and let women die, despite federal guidance requiring hospitals to provide stabilizing care. Paxton has sued the Biden administration over the guidance. There's also the case of Brittany Watts, a Black woman in Ohio who miscarried a non-viable pregnancy. A grand jury is now considering whether to indict her under a weaponized interpretation of a state law that prohibits abuse of a corpse. Whether you're a Black woman in academia or a pregnant white woman in Texas, the message to you is clear. Know your place. And it's not just right-wing men or even older people. Thanks to the Tucker Carlson effect, it's conservative young folks, too.
They're being fed a lie that is the idea of freedom, that if you choose to have a life married to a man, you choose to stay home and have children, that you are being oppressed, when really we were created to do so.
Feminism is this direct punch against masculinity and the male figure in society.
Once they got that equality, they stopped wanting to be equal to men and wanted to start being superior to men.
The Lord created us for two different roles, and therefore I feel that men are meant to have that role in which they lead us, in not just in our household, but in our faith and just in our country.
Well, if that's the case, dear, you might be surprised to learn that the third highest ranking Republican in the House of Representatives is, in fact, a woman. But at least that woman is doing her bit to help out her brethren on the anti-DEI brigade. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, a Harvard graduate, led the bogus questioning at that sham hearing last month, claiming credit for Claudine Gay's exit. Late today, Dr. Gay published an op-ed in the New York Times responding to all of this. And after the break, we will tell you what she had to say about the success of the anti-DEI bullying campaign.
Here's what you need to know about the Claudine Gay plagiarism scandal. It's bullshit. Let me explain. Christopher Rufo, he's the guy that started the critical race theory panic. This is his thing. So he dropped this Twitter thread in which he claimed to prove that Claudine Gay had plagiarized her thesis while she was studying for a PhD at Harvard. This supposed bombshell hinges on two claims. First is that Claudine Gay plagiarized her thesis advisor. Here's the thing. Your thesis advisor is your co-author, not some source you found on the internet. Plagiarism is passing off someone else's work as your own work. A thesis advisor knows the difference between their own work and their students' work. That's kind of their job. And there's inevitably a lot of overlap between the professor's work and the student's work. That's the nature of the advisor-advisee relationship. Claudine Gay's thesis advisor, Gary King, knew full well which parts of Claudine Gay's thesis were derived from his work. There is no plausible way that Claudine Gay tried to pass off her thesis advisor's work as her own. Like, it's just stupid. Now, if you point this out to somebody who's already made up their mind that Claudine Gay is a plagiarist, they will immediately pivot to the second claim, which I'll get to in just a second. But first, consider the pivot, because it gives away the whole game. When you point out how ridiculous it is to claim that Claudine Gay plagiarized her thesis advisor on her thesis, I haven't seen anybody try to defend that claim. They just pivot to the other one. What does that tell you? They didn't believe the first claim. They don't believe the second one either. That's not the point. The point is to stack up as many bullshit claims as they can get away with, because most people haven't done grad level writing. They don't have the context to understand the stupidity of the claim. Anyway, the second claim is also from the thesis. Claudine Gay cites some sources to describe the methods that they use as context for her own work. In the course of doing that, she repeats some of the original source verbiage, close to word for word. And of course, Rufo puts the two pieces of text side by side and says, "Look, she didn't cite her source." The fact that there is a citation at the beginning of the paragraph notwithstanding. If you know anybody that's done academic writing, ask them about writing the methods section. That's where you describe the technical details of the research that you did. Here's the thing about highly technical writing. You're trying to describe a set of very specific concepts, a lot of times using terminology that nobody outside your field understands. The number of ways that you can phrase a piece of technical writing and have it still make sense and be accurate is generally pretty small. One of the lines that Rufo highlighted was using 1987 survey data, which is a technical description of a source of data that was used to do some analysis. And as part of Rufo's little op, he pointed out that the original text said using 1987 national sample survey data, and says, "Oh, look, these are basically the same," which is true, but think about this for a second. How many ways can you rephrase that? The study used survey data from 1987. You can't change 1987, right? Because then it wouldn't be accurate. It was survey data, so what are you going to change it to something else? It doesn't work because it's specific, and it's important to convey the specifics in your academic writing. Besides, it's the methods section of the paper, which is not the part that is what you're actually trying to contribute with your research. That comes in the results and conclusions, and arguably also the introduction, not in the methods. The point of the methods is to give a high-level overview of how you got the results you did. Obviously, you include citations so that if someone's reading your paper and they want to know the details of your methods, they look up your citation. Nobody reading that paper is thinking, oh, this is what Claudine Gay had to say. No, that's, again, not how it works. So that leads to the, what they think of as their trump card, which is the APA citation guidelines, which clearly say you have to put quoted text in quotes. And that is true. It's true now. It was not true in 1987. You see, 1987, the internet was just getting started, meaning this kind of plagiarism that, academics and all teachers really have to deal with today, it wasn't as big of a thing back then. The APA citation guidelines were developed as kind of a result of the ubiquity of the internet. Lots more opportunities to plagiarize. So my question to Chris Rufo is, could you please show me the citation guidelines that were applicable at Harvard in the political science department in 1997, because those are the citation guidelines that Claudine Gay was supposed to follow, and show me where in those guidelines, where did Claudine Gay not follow those guidelines? Obviously, I'm not going to get an answer, right? Like I said, the entire thing is bullshit. But, and this may or may not surprise you, that hasn't stopped a huge number of people from taking Chris Rufo's claims at face value. They just assume Claudine Gay must have plagiarized her thesis. You got these two pieces of text and they look pretty similar, and they're waving the APA citation guidelines from 20 years after the fact in your face, and it can look like a convincing case till you poke at it a bit and it all falls apart, but nobody bothers to poke at it. Can you guess why? A lot of the people who are kind of assuming this is true, they have internalized biases about, well, particularly black folks, that kind of make them think, oh, well, I guess that's not very surprising. I mean, she is a black woman, president of Harvard. She must have gotten there due to the color of her skin. It's not like she could have come by a PhD honestly. And, to be frank, the color of Claudine Gay's skin is important to her being Harvard president. Harvard's been around for what, 500 years, and she's the first black president? That's valuable to Harvard. And this, she's only published 12 papers. College presidents don't publish papers. They're administrators. So yeah, this whole op just really annoys me because it's so stupid. But what really bothers me is how many people are just sort of oh, well, that makes sense, and not realizing that they just got played by Chris Rufo.
So this is all I got from the
internalized bias.
I said this here, I think in December, when when the Jewish dissident said that she's anti-Semitic, and they were like, she needs to resign, this was what they said in their own word, for being anti-Semitic, because she was asked a question, does the Israel or the Jewish, do they have right, to protect themselves and all that. She told them it depends on how, and not even up to how many days. I mean, she has resigned. And the reality is that from that point, when I brought that video here, I knew something was going to happen, but I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I was so much concerned about her because she actually spoke her truth, right? Because she spoke her truth, she is anti-Semitic, right? And now, I knew from the moment she was sworn in, they already knew that her resignation was totally expected, kind of, because she's a black woman, and she is just guilty of succeeding because of being a black woman. And I am so sorry that this happened to her. And it is kind of tragic that she resigned. But I don't think I know there is something behind all of this. But we are definitely going to get to the root of it, because this is just like everything unfolding. And the fact that, okay, I think, where I saw this, this first, I saw it from a post, I think in an African community. And I am really glad that most Africans are waking up to already white, palm-colored supremacists and all that. And the comments that I read and all that, people talking about her and saying, what do you expect by people that own slaves during slavery? Harvard. What do you expect from them? Number one is that they actually think black people cannot flourish, black people cannot prosper without probably because like some of them are already questioning her how she got her PhD, and are you sure she made it through the right way, or because she's all these questions are what some of them are asking. And I keep asking myself that the fact that your skin color will stop you from getting what you are supposed to, what you are entitled to, is something that baffles me. And the fact that this is still happening till this very moment, I am not sure it is ever going to end. But the best we can do is keep hammering and keep telling them, let them know that we are already aware of what they do and how they operate. It is really so hard to hear this, because every time it refuels me with blind rage, and that is it. You know how they say black wealth or black success is something they ever do not want to ever see. And then when they see black success, they are enraged and they are asking, how did it happen? And then the next thing you are going to see is that they are looking for a way to let that person down and all that. I really hope she can sue for defamation, because that is all I see. As women, we really need to stand together. I know you all are doing everything in your power to uphold so many things. But are black people are they asking for much? I don't think so. The only thing they are asking for is that so that they can dismantle the system that is oppressing black people. Until this very moment, it is still oppressing them, because you can see it. And you see Rufus, the man that is behind everything going on, the one that also started critical race theory panic. Man, I am just, I just don't know what to say. I hope she can fight back, and I hope she gets rightfully what belongs to her in the end. See you all in my next video. Bye for now.